This project was made possible by and in collaboration with the good people of Aquascape and Tussey Landscaping.
So I found this turtle trying to cross the street, and I decided I'd bring him home. We're gonna set him up with a new setup here shortly. Now seriously, you guys know who this is?
Well, I'm Greg Whitstock, the pond guy, and this is actually not going to be on. This is actually going to be on Ed, the pond professor, which is right here. So when we came here, we decided that we were looking at the back, but we decided that the front yard might be better for the long-term vision, because we know one thing about this guy and one thing about water features is the average person gets 3: big, bigger, biggest. And so we're going to go. He's got the formal water feature in the back. He's going to get the informal one in the front, and then something else is going to be done in the back.
Yeah.
And
long-term.
And we want to show you the process, the step-by-step process that Aquascape has developed over 28 years in business. Ed's been with me for 26. We're going to show our local certified Aquascape contractor, Tussey, in here with one of the kits coming in. But we want to inspire people to live the Aquascape lifestyle. And you're an artist, you're going to be living the Aquascape lifestyle. It's 9 o'clock now. By, let's say, 4 o'clock today, we're going to have an Aquascape ecosystem pond in here.
Believe it.
I'd love to do a two-facing waterfall. So maybe one facing, side view from the street, front view from the driveway, and then obviously for the sound turning back in. And then I'd like to get the water feature up close to.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, is pulling some of this out a little bit.
Yeah.
Getting it a little tighter.
All right, here you go.
I would agree.
That master designer.
To start the process, Ed put down an extension cord to make a guide for the main pond area. If you recall, this is similar to the guides I used when making the DIY pond. It's good to make a guide so that way you can adjust everything before painting your grass. To make sure that the pond was sized appropriately for the 8x11 kit, Ed made calculations using his feet. This is one of those times when it comes in handy to have a nice pair of size 12s.
All right, Eddie, what do you got, bud?
All right, so after discussing with Tanner, we came up with a new design over here. We're going to lay out the pond in the front. It's really going to work well. We're going to have our waterfall tucked in back over in the corner. It's going to kind of twist around a little bit, like you were saying, Greg. I love the idea of the pond getting kind of close up to the patio area, but we want to have a little bit of a buffer. We can kind of soften it up with some plant material. I laid out a simple design, and that's because this is not a huge pond. So on a smaller pond, you don't want to create all types of really intricate coves and things like that, because the rocks are going to make those coves disappear. So we have basically a very simple design. It's going to have a nice big open water area for some fish and things like that, but we'll also have a series of shelves inside. The other thing that I did from a flow perspective is you see how the pond kind of narrows down to one point. So this is the narrower spot. This is replicating nature. Whenever you see a waterfall coming in nature, it's going to kind of carve the pockets and pools out a little bit. So we're going to have water kind of dumping in over here, and then it will widen itself out. And then we'll have our skimmer located somewhere over on that back edge from a circulation standpoint. The piping system, we're going to run from one side over to the other where our biofalls is going to be located. And that's it. Now we're ready for paint and excavation.
Do you mind if your extension cord gets some orange paint on it?
I'll go right inside of it. So make like a little curve right here. We're going to cut in that a little bit. So we're going to want to come all the way into there.
And look at this. Rembrandt.
Once spray paint was down, we removed a section of the old landscape to make room for the edge of the pond. After that, Weston set up a transit so that we could keep track of the water level throughout the build. At this point, it was finally time to start excavating, and thankfully Tussey brought out a small excavator for the job. It's amazing how quickly you can get a pond dug with heavy equipment. That said, I'm glad I dug my first pond by hand. It gives me perspective and a better appreciation for something like this. While Matt did most of the excavation, we set up some of the filter components. Ed and Greg have been developing these for over 20 years, so setup is really easy. It simply consists of attaching a few bulkheads, pipes, and other components to the main assembly. I'll explain more about how it works near the end of the video. At this point, the preliminary shape of the pond was carved out, including a section for the skimmer. The team also dug out a trench on the backside of the pond for length of flex PVC. This will be used to connect the skimmer to the biofalls filter. The tube was put in place and concealed with dirt, leaving a length exposed on either end. From there, the section for the skimmer was dug and tamped flat. The skimmer was put in place, leveled out, and backfilled with clean stone and dirt to keep it situated. Then the remainder of the excavation could take place, and in came the rain. Welcome to Pittsburgh, everyone.
Rain is picking up. Yeah, exactly, right? Well, thankfully Matt's in the excavator. He can take care of it.
It is really coming down.
Once the rain subsided, the remainder of the pond was dug and fine-tuned using shovels. You'll notice that the basin of the pond is dug out in stairs or shelves. This is done so that rocks can be securely stacked up to hide the liner and create a naturalistic look. Much like the pond that we built in the backyard, we ran into a slight issue with this one. The hole kept filling up with groundwater since it's mostly clay. To deal with this, we put a perforated pipe near the edge of the pond to give the water somewhere to go. This pipe feeds out through the retaining wall and drains into my driveway. Of course, doing so was easier said than done. The pipe had to be fed through a trench underneath of the concrete and through the planter bed. From here, the pond basin was lined with some underlayment fabric for protection. Then a sheet of EPDM liner was gradually worked into the hole. Once the pond was lined, larger rocks were carefully stacked around the interior of the pond in a way that they lock into each other. Per request, I wanted to use sandstone because I can source it locally, and I had a few pieces that I wanted to incorporate in this build. As I'm sure you probably noticed, the majority of the stones were able to be moved by hand, but a few of the larger ones had to be moved with straps attached to the excavator. At this point, the liner could be attached to the skimmer. To do so, Ben started by wiping off the backside of the liner and skimmer box to remove any debris. The liner was aligned with the top of the skimmer, and a hole was cut out using a razor. In doing so, the hole was cut slightly smaller than the opening itself. Once cut, the faceplate was put through the liner to dry fit all of the pieces. They fit together properly, so then a bead of silicone was ran along the front of the skimmer box. The silicone will pick up any slack and account for irregularities in the liner once attached, in effect creating a watertight seal. The front plate and liner were then attached to the skimmer with some brass bolts. Lastly, the skimmer door and basket were put in place. I'll explain more about how this filter works later on. From here, pieces of sandstone, pea gravel, and river stones were put throughout the basin of the pond. The idea is that all of these different stones work together to hide the liner and create a stable unit which is firmly locked in place. During this process, underwater lights were also strategically installed throughout the rocks. Once most of the rocks were in the basin, it was simultaneously filled and drained of water to remove a lot of the debris that was introduced with the rocks. At this point, it's time to tackle the waterfall. Before we do that though, let's check back in with Ed real quick.
We're making progress. We got our rocks coming in on the bottom. We got some cool fish caves over in here for some of his catfish. Weston is doing his magic over there, setting in some cool big stones for that waterfall that's going to be coming into the pond. Now remember, early on we discussed where the biofalls was going to sit. That's going to be the point of the water. So that's where the water is going to be discharged from our pumping system. So over here we have our mechanical skimmer filter. We have a 3,000 gallon per hour pump. We have our 1.5-inch line going around the outside perimeter. Now over here, that's where the biofalls is going to be discharged. We're going to have the waterfall coming out facing kind of towards the street. It's going to fall into a little bit of a pooling area, and then it's going to come into view right towards the seating area over in here. But I'm loving the way those rocks are coming together. It's kind of opening that up. We're trying to utilize those interesting faces on the natural stones. So all that water is going to kind of come right in between that little joint over in there.
As Ed explained, it's time for the waterfall to take shape. Large stones were placed near the front of the berm, which was created with the excavated dirt. The liner for the waterfall was then placed behind these stones and over top of the basin's liner. Once situated behind the rocks, the liner was folded down into the pond so that the berm could be taken care of. To do so, a few shapes were spray painted onto the dirt to create a guide for stairs. These of course were dug out, and the excess dirt was redistributed to the other areas of the berm. From there, a hole was dug out for the biofall's filter. Much like the basin, the berm was lined with some underlayment and then the EPDM liner. Once the liner was pulled back, the end was adjusted and then concealed with rocks. Back to Ed for a quick rundown on the biofall's filter.
So this is an upflow biological filter. We call it the biofalls. We developed this many years ago. So what we have is we have an 1.5 or 2 inch connection over on this end, depending upon the pump. This particular one is 1.5 inches. So we also have this strategically located in the middle, so this is going to hold the filter pads up. But what this does is the fast moving water comes in and it hits that and it spits and it kind of spins around and creates a swirling action. And what happens is you can see actually some of the mud down there in the bottom. It allows the sedimentation process to occur. So we want that stuff to churn around, big solids to settle out, anything that gets through the filter pads down on the mechanical side. So this will get a lot of fine grit and stuff like that. Then the water goes up through the different filter pads and bio balls. We have a series of bolts here in the front, or grommets, where we could make a watertight connection between our rubber liner and the filter itself. So this is going to be a compression seal over in here. So we can get that placed, backwards. It's going to go like that. And then we also have a rock tray that goes on the top. So that tray that goes on the top actually has a series of little pockets, and you could load that up with all different types of aquatic vegetation. So we have the biological filtration of the filter pads, we have bioballs, and then you have the phytoremediation of all the aquatic plants. The plants will send their roots down inside of all that flowing water. They grow like they're on steroids. They're going to just be popping out all over the place. That'll hide this up, and then the waterfall will be on the other side. So we're getting ready right now. We have our trench dug. We're going to connect this up, glue our pipe, and then start building this entire waterfall.
And that's how you get a clear pond.
That's it.
From there, the flex PVC, which is connected to the overflow, was cemented to the biofalls. After that, the PVC was concealed with dirt. Like the overflow, a bead of silicone was ran along the main assembly of the biofalls. Then the liner was sandwiched in between the main assembly and the spillway, being secured with brass bolts. The excess liner covering the spillway was of course removed later on. As we set up the filter, the waterfall and pooling areas also took shape. They were created pretty much the same way as the basin, by strategically stacking stones to conceal the liner. The difference, however, is that areas between the rocks are filled in with expanding foam to help direct the flow of water over the rocks. We also incorporated a lot of moss and driftwood that I sourced locally. You know that this build wouldn't be complete without either of these, and I think they are some of the elements that really help take this build to the next level. While we were working on all of the finishing touches, the pond was filling up with water so that no time was wasted, and by this point it was pretty much done. All that we had to do was add mulch, stones, and a few plants from around the yard. Of course there's a lot more plants to come, but we just needed a few to start with. To finish things off, Greg went around and rinsed everything off.
Tanner, you do one side, she'll do the other. You can be the male, she could be the female. Unless you want to reverse it.
I don't know. All right.
All right, the skimmer is on. It's starting to draw. You can hear, and we're about to give birth to a new waterfalls. And all of us will sit here and enjoy what we did. See if we like it, and if not,
You're taking it home.
yeah, we'll just, if not, we'll come back. Ooh, I love the sound already. Already love the sound.
I love that you can see really the upper one more here.
Look at that log. One more. And there it is, the birth of a new Waterfalls.
Here it is, the final product, my very own Aquascape ecosystem pond. In just over 7 hours we transformed my average front yard into a destination spot. In fact, we would have done it way sooner if it wasn't for all of the rain. Even though it's only been set up for a few days, my wife and I have already spent a lot of time in our rockers just enjoying the sound and sights this has to offer. To be honest, I was initially apprehensive about putting the pond out front, but as Greg always says, we give the customer what they want, not what they ask for. And as much as it pains me to admit it, this is exactly what I wanted. Initially I was convinced that the pond needed to go out back as you saw earlier in the video, but it's perfect right here. The funny thing is that my wife and I are both low-key people. Having a beautiful pond out front isn't exactly low-key. However, even though this pond draws so much attention, it creates an area and a feeling of seclusion that wouldn't be present otherwise, a barrier of sorts that separates us and our home from the rest of the world. As I'm sure you could guess, this pond is far from complete. I still have to fine tune the landscape and of course add a ton of plants. I also have to adjust the placement of the ones that are there currently. And my yard needs fixed as well. Normally this doesn't happen, but the rain really complicated things and made quite a mess. The water is still somewhat cloudy, and that too is the result of rain. That said, it should be completely clear any day now. While we're talking about the water, let's do a recap on the filter. The water overflows into the skimmer, which is concealed by fake rock. In here is a removable basket, metalamat, and the pump. The water is pulled through the mat and transported up to the biofalls filter. Inside here the water rises up through the media and overflows to create the waterfall. Of course, a lot of the biological filtration also happens within the rocks and gravel of the pond itself. There's also an automatic dosing system which adds water treatments such as dechlorinator. Per my request, I wanted to design the waterfall so that it consisted of various pooling areas. I think the team did an amazing job creating such a look, and it's by far my favorite part of the build, especially this section right here. There's so much more that I could say, but I'll save that for the future installments of this build. A huge thanks to Weston, Steve, Matt, and Ben of Tussey Landscaping, Kevin of Sorghel Landscapes, and of course Ed and Greg of Aquascape for making this build possible. I had an awesome time building and learning alongside all of these guys, and made some new friends in the process. Check out the video description for links on the products used and more information. Also, I hope I did this process justice in a video format. It was really tough trying to participate in the build, learn the process, film, and provide for everyone involved. I will say though that after seeing the process for myself, I could confidently build something like this way easier and quicker than the build that I did previously. Don't get me wrong though, I still love my other pond. Anyways, if you want to see the continued progress of this build and see how I live the Aquascape lifestyle, then be sure to subscribe and join the Serpa Squad today. I'll catch you on the next one, Serpa Squad. Take care and peace. Now Greg's got me saying I love my pond.